welcome, and it's an honor to have Mr. Maynard Holliday. He is performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Critical Technologies of the United States Department of Defense. You definitely don't remember this because you have 1,000 people briefing you, but I once worked in the 5G Next G shop, and I briefed you a couple of times.
Oh, really? With who was in charge then?
We were in transition.
Amanda?
Yes, Amanda.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so so it wasn't that good of a briefing. You didn't remember it. Cool. Yeah.
I hear a lot.
In his capacity, he oversees investment and capability analysis of the Pentagon's critical technology areas, and that includes a large number of technologies. But for us, what we really focus on here really is artificial intelligence and autonomy. Mr. Holliday has 30 years of professional experience leading tech innovation in government and in the private sector. And we can literally be here for 30 minutes going down Mr. Holliday's very impressive resume, but I'm going to highlight a few key areas. He was a senior engineer at the RAND Corporation, where he worked on autonomous vehicle safety metrics and policy. He served as a senior technical advisor and special assistant to Frank Kendall, of course, who was the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology and Logistics. He was one of the plank holders of the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental and was on senior member of the Defense Science Board. He also served in various engineering capacities, Lawrence Livermore, Sandia Laboratories, and multiple startups, robotic startups in Silicon Valley. Mr. Holliday is a co-organizer of Black in Robotics, a virtual worldwide community of roboticists and their allies whose mission is to bring together Black researchers, industry professionals, and students in robotics to mutually support one another. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. Mm-hmm. And then Mr. Holliday is a graduate of Carnegie Mellon, and he also a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. He later won a scholarship to attend Stanford and received a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering Design. And Mr. Holliday also won a scholarship to attend the International Space University in France and was a 2-time finalist to be an astronaut. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. And okay. I'm here talking to you today because I didn't get picked. And so, tragically, I interviewed with the pilot and commander of Columbia, who I knew personally. There, but for the grace of God. So I am here.
Awesome. Well, we're really glad to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here.
Thank you. So we'll just kind of jump into it. Mm-hmm. You and I in the green room, we sat down and we looked at the videos that all of our. I just kind of want to get a nice reaction. How do you kind of react to the videos?
Yeah, so impressive. I'm a Tesla owner. As a geek and from the Bay. I have 2 Teslas. I have Tesla Solar on my home, and so. What I saw in those videos, impressive. Autonomous driving is a data problem. As a roboticist myself, there's a lot of corner cases that autonomy is just not going to be able to solve. And so I think what we're seeing in China is, they are getting more data to be able to navigate in complex environments. For us, I think the closest instantiation is going to be in geofenced areas that are well characterized. And we're never going to see, I don't think, in my lifetime, what we call level 5. So that's any point A to any point B in any condition. The driving domain, assessment will have to be taken into account before we get that ubiquitous autonomy. But the Chinese certainly are able to manufacture at volume and at lower cost. And you see both political parties posturing by putting up tariffs to let our industry catch up, with price and production. And so. Very impressive.
So I want to turn that question kind of on the flip side there. Mm-hmm. What advantages does the United States have in this technological competition with China, with any other country with whom we're competing right now?
Yeah, so I'd say, so between administrations, I worked at the RAND Corporation. I opened their San Francisco office, and one of the things we were looking at is our competitiveness vis-a-vis China in AI. And so we have a much more innovative technology ecosystem. Our data sets are more heterogeneous, and we're able, because what we've recently seen is we haven't seen the Chinese version of OpenAI. We haven't seen the Chinese version of Gemini, out of Google. They're coming out of our AI ecosystems. So we are well positioned to win this competition because of our open system. And people forget that China has moved into a surveillance state where they spend an inordinate amount of resources surveilling their population and suppressing opposition. And so, that's not the case in the West. So, people need to understand that. So I think we're in a good position to maintain our technological advantage, and as we get into the discussion, I'll tell you how we're doing that.
Awesome. So we're going to go around the other side of the globe, and we're going to talk Ukraine. And so basic question here, which is, really how are the lessons, we've heard a lot today about the lessons the Pentagon's learning. And how are you and your team strategically managing, who's charged with the strategic management of these critical technologies? How are you incorporating these lessons learned into your operations, your day-to-day activity?
Yeah, so good question. I get briefed almost daily on the Ukrainian situation about what's working and our flows of munitions into in country, how successful the systems from our Bradleys to our 155 millimeter shells. And what we're learning is that we have asymmetry here with drone warfare. And as the general said, 2 panels ago, we have to be able to counter that and reduce what we call that exchange ratio. So we're not expending really valuable assets to take out a $200 or or a 6-figure drone from Iran or China with a $1 million missile. So what we're learning is how to employ non-kinetic effects to mitigate the drone threat, and we have several programs in the classified level that are working that issue.
I think it's interesting. One of the things that we hear a lot is just how successful the Ukrainians have been in quickly integrating technology. And so I'm always fascinated, because on one hand, if you're in a shooting war, there's an incentive, right, to really move fast and do this. But then, 50 years from now, are you going to be able to operate? And it seems like to me, based on what we've heard today, the Pentagon's kind of charged with doing both. And you have the second. Your team really has the second part of that, which is really looking more long term and making sure that we're positioned to be able to compete over the long term.
Right, and so we recognize private industry, as you've heard, and represented by Applied Intuition, is moving faster than we are, and so we need to first and fast follow where appropriate, and bring into our systems the latest technology. However, we recognize that the data that we're going to use in AI is going to have to be specific to us. It's going to be bespoke, and we, as you heard earlier, there'll be a human on the loop or in the loop to adhere to our 3000.09, which is to make sure that lethal effects are commanded, there's commander's intent, and lethal effects are approved by a human. However, that doesn't preclude us from acting at machine speed in our defense. And so don't get it twisted. We are working to make sure that our assets and our personnel are defended at the speed that they are attacked.
So, got a cool question, I think, from the audience. So
Okay.
we'll fire away at you. It says the services, DIU, DARPA, et cetera, are all working to find and develop technology and capabilities, sometimes in collaboration with each other, sometimes not. Observation. From your perspective, do you think there is redundancy of effort and budget across the department?
Yeah, so absolutely. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We have 50 software factories spread out that work on different. For the services, there's Kessel Run, Star Wars reference out of New England, working on the Air Force. We have the Forge, which is a Navy software factory, and so to have some overlap is, I think a good thing. Whether to have just one central hub, and we saw what centrality and that architecture failed with respect to its instantiation in the former Soviet Union, and so we're much more agile, and the fact that we have all of these different centers, I think is an advantage.
So I wanted to pivot quickly to something that everyone's talking about: artificial intelligence.
Yep.
So it's been talked about over and over again today. Every headline that you can possibly read. We are in the midst of an AI boom, both in the Valley and in DC right now. And while things appear to be moving very quickly, I think that it's fair to say that there's a good bit of debate about whether these technologies, such as generative AI in particular, can really develop quality value, can deliver value to our nation's warfighters. And so my question is what areas in this space are you most concerned or not mature enough to really to bring to defense at this point?
Well, I'd say to employ lethal effects, using generative AI, we're nowhere near being able to do that. However, being able to understand the battle space, our goal is to have AI as a shipmate, a crewmate, and have a commander and anybody else in leadership be able to ask the AI, in natural language, to give them situational awareness. Like, what's the probability of kill, if I did this? What is the time to target if I employ this hypersonic system? And be able to, converse, with an AI to get situational awareness. And so there's Task Force Lima, which is, within the DoD, in the CDAO's office, that has surveyed the services writ large about where they see using generative AI to make their processes more efficient. And most of the processes are business related or administrative to make them more efficient. And I think you heard earlier, from the general about how the Army sees looking at AI to work on mission planning, and so that's how we see the initial rollout and instantiation of this, and all these companies are in my office almost weekly, talking about what they can do, and how they don't need a billion entity foundational model to help us. They can use much less data to model what we need, and give us a good feedback.
Yes, sir. And so one of the things as I started working at Applied Intuition is spend a lot of time studying this stuff, and it seems obvious to someone with your educational credentials, but for a country bumpkin, maybe it takes me a little longer. And so there's no AI without compute.
Right.
Right? And there's no AI at the edge, even if you have compute, if you are in a denied environment, right?
However, so
Kinda?
well, yeah. So let me, as my millennials would say, let me drop some science. Yeah. So the DoD is funding. So we recognize we're at the 2D lithography limit. Moore's law. We're barely sub 2 micron. And so to that end, my office has led efforts to study the next dimension, which is 3D, to increase the capability of our chips and to be able to do compute at the edge as well as inference. And so when you're in a denied environment, all the AI that you and I interact with, Siri and others, talks to the cloud to get you your result. So in a contested or denied environment, that's going to be jammed or offline. So you need that compute at the edge. So we're working on 3D, heterogeneous chips. The other thing we're funding is neuromorphic processing, which is a non-von Neumann architecture where you don't have the bottleneck between memory and CPU. It's based on human brain neural net, and so much more efficient, lower swap, so you can do inference at the edge.
Great. And that is why your office has in particularly put, I'd say, a huge investment in microelectronics.
Right.
And you're working with some industry giants in that area. And this really, before we pivot to the human element, what we've heard a lot today about what the department needs to do to work better with industry. I want to play the contrarian role a little bit better here. What does industry need to do to be a better teammate with the Department of Defense, in your opinion?
I'd say don't be. There's a lot of front doors now to interact with us. So as said in my introduction, when I worked for Secretary Kendall, Ash Carter came out with a speech in spring of 2015, said, look, we need to rewire the Pentagon. We need to stand up this Defense Innovation Unit. And he didn't have any idea. And so he went to Kendall and said, it's on you, Frank. And Frank came to me, said, you're from Silicon Valley, go out there and make it happen. And so I helped stand it up, but I talked to my counterparts out there and said, what would bring you in? And so we recognized you got to get under contract, not within a year, but within 60 to 90 days. And we also have to be able to provide you access to our test ranges, and if possible, jump you to the front of the line with the Patent and Trademark Office, so you have first mover advantage. And so all of these software factories now, the AFWorks and Naval X and Kessel Run that I just talked about are front doors now that you can access to work with the department. And you've heard DIU now, has almost $1 billion to put on contracts for Replicator and other technologies to close the gap for technologies that we think will be disruptive to the fight. So there's, like I said, a bunch of front doors now. And the only social media I'm on is LinkedIn, so you can reach out to me. And if you have something that passes my vet with my principal directors who are subject matter experts in their technology area, you'll be in my office.
And make sure that when you reach out to Mr. Holliday that you actually say, hey, we saw you at #Nexus24.
Right.
I got to try.
Yeah.
Gotta respect the craft.
Right.
All right. Human element for a second. We hear, again, you're obviously a man who values education immensely. Mm-hmm. And you've gone to some of our nation's most elite institutions, and it's really remarkable. But what are some of the how can I guess my question is: should we be casting a wider net when we start looking for talent when across this great country of ours?
Mm-hmm.
We're in this great competition,
Right.
and part of that competition is talent. So we
Right.
should be looking overseas, of course, as we
Mm-hmm.
discussed today. But are there educational institutions in this country where we're not really working hard enough to look for really remarkable, hardworking talent who wants to come work in technology?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's part of my passion is to diversify that STEM pipeline. And so some sobering numbers: 25% of Black STEM bachelor's degrees come from HBCUs. 50% of Black female STEM PhDs come from HBCUs. And actually, my peer, Assistant Secretary for Science and Technology, is one of those. Her name is Dr. April Erickson, undergrad MIT, first African-American woman to graduate from Howard with her PhD. 31 years at NASA, recently confirmed by the Senate to be, like I said, my peer ASD. And from a UARC standpoint, so that's our university affiliated research centers, the department has 14 of them. And as of 2017, they've received over $75 billion. So that's Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, that's Georgia Tech Research Institute, and the HBCU allocation over that same period was only $357 million, or 0.5%. And so if we're serious about competing with China that graduates 400 and plus thousand STEM graduates a year, we need full participation and of all of our human capital. So this is not a political. This is a national security imperative. And so to that point, I made the point to my former boss, Secretary Kendall, who's the Secretary of the Air Force now, that the Air Force doesn't have a UARC, or it didn't, until we talked to him and said, there's a gap here. Let's address it by having an HBCU-led consortium to address tactical autonomy. And so this is the concept of man-machine teaming, swarms, to be able to keep our airmen out of harm's way when they're engaging a near-peer adversary. And so he agreed, and so the 15th University Affiliated Research Center stood up a year ago at Howard. They brought 9 other HBCUs to the table, and we're helping to diversify that STEM pipeline in the name of national security.
It's fantastic. There are a number of people in this audience today that represent academic institutions that are taking a lot of interest in what you have to say. My friend Chris Hospital from the University of Texas is one, and so it's great to hear that that's a core part of what your strategic management. As you can see there, we're running low on time, and I want to end this conversation really with a question. There are also out here some folks I've had the chance to meet today that are aspiring founders or they're early stage founders, and they're trying to break into the department. Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for women and men who are taking that difficult path with all your experience, both in startups, academia, now in the department? Like, how would you advise a young founder? What advice you have?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, we have a lot of front doors, and one of them is, we're tasked by Congress to develop roadmaps for the department for these critical technology areas and for space, which is a domain. But they are at the controlled, unclassified level, available for you to download off of our website. You can get our roadmaps and find out where our technical gaps are and see if the technology you're developing addresses those. And then the other thing is to look at commercial dual use technology that may have a defense use, and that we could fund that defense use if you've already established a commercial use case. But like I said, there are several front doors, and I'm one of them.
That's great. Mr. Holliday, it has been a pleasure. And thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us here at Nexus 24. And we look forward to having you back next time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.